If I say the words control freak, do you have a positive or a negative image in your mind? All right, think about the person in your family. Control freak, like they're in charge of everything. Do you think positive or negative of someone that's a control freak? Okay, that's like a negative comment. You go, man, dude, she's a control freak. He's a control freak. Like they want to be in control of everything, in charge of everything. Well, the reality is there is somebody who is like the ultimate control freak in charge of everything. But it's okay because he's God. And he is in control of everything. And in Genesis 49 and through the end of the book, chapter 50, we're going to read about God being in control. So if you open your Bibles to Genesis 49, the first 27 verses are Jacob's blessing of his sons, and then beginning verse 28 in chapter 49, then down through the end of chapter 50, we want to be reminded about how God's in control. The first thing to note is that God is in control of our lives. Look what he says in verse 29. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each with a blessing suitable to him. Then he commanded them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, and the cave that is in the field at Machpelah to the east of Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into a bed and breathed his last, was gathered to his people. I don't know what it's like to know that you're at the end of your life. Apparently y'all think I do know what it's like to be at the end of my life. I don't know what it's like. I've been with people who were there. I've walked with people and their families through their remaining days and hours, but I don't personally know what it's like to know that there are just a few hours left. But Jacob does, and so he's now come to the end of his life, and he does what lots of people wanted to do, and that is to make sure that the final arrangements are taken care of. Matter of fact, we use that terminology, final arrangements. And I would encourage you to make some final arrangements, to have a will for what's going to happen when your life is done. Now, if you don't have a will, you have made a declaration that you fully and completely trust the government, because they will dispose of all of your stuff as they see fit. So I think it would be better if you had a will, because I think you know better what to do with your stuff than the government does. As a matter of fact, in this passage, Jacob doesn't trust the government. He doesn't trust the Egyptians to take care of him. He's talking to his family. He says, I want my family to take care of me. And I think we can agree with that. I don't think we should trust the government. Why not? Well, because the government is not an entity. The government is made up of people, and people are sinful by nature. And when you put people who are sinful by nature into positions of authority and power, it is very difficult for them not to become corrupted by it. Even good people, well-meaning people, they're still sinful people. And so it's the reason our Constitution limits the amount of power the federal government has, and instead relegates these rights to the several states. Maybe we need to have a Government 101 class, since most people don't learn this in school. But the reason for that is not a distrust of the entity of government, it's distrust of human beings who are sinful by nature. And so Jacob doesn't trust. He says, I want my family to make sure that my final arrangements are taken care of. And so he says, I don't want to be buried here. I want to be buried back there. And so I want to talk a little bit about the way they practice burial and why it talks about this cave in the field of Machpelah. So the way they did burial in Bible times is they would have a cave, and sometimes they dug out the cave, created themselves, and on the sides of the walls they would have slots. And when someone would die, they would do a little procedure to them where they would put some oils and fragrances and things to cover up the smell of a decomposing body, and they would wrap it, mummify it in swaddling cloths. Sounds really cute that they did this with Jesus, but they basically mummified him with strips of cloth. And so you would put them in the slot. Now over time, the body would decompose and eventually be left with just some bones in that slot. So you take the bones and you would scoop them off into a box called an ossuary, a bone box. You would inscribe their name on it, stack them up at the back of the cave. And so if the family's been out a long time, the cave's pretty deep, and there are lots of stacks of just bone boxes of all the ancestors that are back there, and then the people who have died in more recent years are left in the slots. That's the way that they would do it. So actually, in the Bible, they didn't bury people. Like we think of bury under the ground. They would put them in the slot, and then eventually there's nothing left but just the bones, and eventually that's nothing left but dust. And so he says, I want to be taken back to the cave of Machpelah, because I find it interesting. He says, there they buried Abraham and Sarah, not grandma and grandpa. And then he says, Isaac and Rebekah, not mom and dad. Like he calls them all by name. He says, look, that's the family burial place. That's where I want to go, and that's where I want to be buried. So I want to take just a minute here and talk a little bit about a question I get sometimes, and that is it a sin to be cremated instead of buried? No. If God put you together from dust, he can put you together from ashes. And so, matter of fact, your body will not be resurrected. You'll have a different body, a resurrection body. I'm glad. I don't want to have to deal with this one again. That needs to go see doctors and stuff. So it's going to be a new body. So no, cremation is not a violation. As a matter of fact, cremation just gets us faster from body to dust than stuck inside of a tomb or a slot in a wall. It's just more expedient. And then I don't know what they're going to do with you. Mine are going to be spread on a mountain bike trail. But so don't worry if you have plans of being cremated that God can't put you back together. Believe me, he's got your DNA blueprint. And so you're good to go. Don't worry. So but he says, look, that's where I want to go, and that's where I want to be buried. And I love the last statement in verse 33. When finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet in the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. What does it mean, gathered to his people? It doesn't mean that he was gathered as in buried with them. It means that when you die, it's not over yet. He was gathered to Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah. He was gathered to his people. And so it is a message of hope for you and me that when we die, we go to be with those who are also believers in Jesus who have gone before us. We will be gathered to our people. And so I just love that description of gathered to his people. So God has been in control of Abraham and Sarah, in control of Isaac and Rebekah, and been in control of Jacob and Leah and Rachel and Bilhah, all the concubines. It gets more complicated. We got 4 of them, Zilpah and all them. So he's been in charge all their lives. So every year for Christmas, my mom does one of these. It's the family calendar. And so you can look through it and be reminded that your family is weird like everybody else's. Yeah, you don't think yours is. And so this calendar hangs in my office wall. It's got like pictures, of this stuff in the family. And it also has all the birthdays for family members. Now, in August, we'll add family member number 30. So you have, for those of you so we'll help you. We have 2 parents, 4 kids. That's 6. All 4 kids are married. That's 10. 10 grandkids is 20. Of those 10 grandkids, 4 are married. That gets us to 24. And then the 6th great-grandchild from our parents will be born in August. That makes 30. And so there are 30 connected with the Smiths. And it's a frightening thought. So it's good to know, because the reality is I can't keep up. For a while I could keep up with everybody's birthday. I can't keep up with that many. It's just too much. So all the birthdays are in here, and they're all color-coded. Pink for the girls and blue for the boys. I don't really need that. I know which ones are boys and girls. But anyway, it's kind of a nice touch. And so we have all that. So there's this, family. It's got a few of the holidays. And then, of course, May's the most important month, because 3 of us have birthdays in May. And so it just kind of, and this calendar is really nice because it's pictures of the family hanging on the wall. And, it kind of keeps up with birthdays. But the reality is this isn't like my real calendar. Y'all know what my real calendar is. It's on my phone. Exactly. And it's linked to my tablet, so both of them have all this stuff. And so, that's where all the stuff. And now some of you are planners. You could whip your phone out right now. Tell me you were going to be on a Thursday 3 years from now. Man, you're one of those people. Some of you are like, my phone has a calendar? You don't even know you don't know what a calendar is, and you're not really sure what a watch is for. Like, we understand that too. But the reality is, whether you're a planner or not, you really can't plan your days because God is in control of them. You can never say with 100% absolute certainty, I will be there. Because ultimately, God's the one who decides all of that. And so, Jacob knows that God has been in charge of his life, knows he's been in charge of his parents' life, knows he's been in charge of his grandparents' life. There's a recognition that God is in control of his life, and yes, even in control of when his life here will come to an end. Then in chapter 50, beginning verse 1, we're going to be reminded that God is in charge or in control of all of our relationships and our encounters. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it, for that is how many are required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. And when the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, if now I have found favor in your eyes, please speak in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, my father made me swear, saying, I'm about to die. In my tomb that I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan, there shall you bury me. Now therefore let me please go up and bury my father, then I will return. And Pharaoh answered, go up and bury your father as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. There went up with him both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atab, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and grievous lamentation, and he made a mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atab, they said, this is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians. Therefore the place was named Abel Mitzrayim. It is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had commanded them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field at Machpelah to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. Now Joseph has been placed here by God. And one of the relationships that God has placed him in is that Joseph has authority over the embalmers of Egypt. This is very, very important. God's in control of not just sort of the big stuff, but all the little stuff and all the details. Now, why is it important that God has put Joseph in a place to be in charge of the embalmers of Egypt? Well, because the embalmers of Egypt embalm bodies so that they would last for centuries. Now, why is that important? Well, for us, if Jacob dies, we can get him from the land of Goshen, which is in Egypt, up to the land of Israel in a few hours by automobile, even less by a plane. But in those days, they traveled by foot. It took weeks. You may not be very aware of what happens to a human body in the desert, in the heat, over weeks. But trust me, the decomposition doesn't wait 2 or 3 months to begin. So we've got to get Jacob's body from Egypt to land of Canaan. And it's going to take weeks to get there. So it needs to be embalmed so that it can arrive there. And then they don't got to smell it the whole way. So Joseph, because of the relationships that God has put in his life, is able to command the embalmers of Egypt to do their 40-day practice. I'm not going to describe to you how they did embalming because some of you would get ill. I'll just give you a little hint. They would remove the brains, and they did it by putting a straw up the nose and sucking them out. And you thought your job was bad. So so Joseph, God's put him in this kind of relationship, this position, so that they can get the body embalmed. He also has a relationship with Pharaoh because he's the second most powerful man in all the land. He's been placed in charge of the distribution of food during a time of drought. So he goes in to Pharaoh and he requests permission to leave because Joseph is from Canaan. And how does Pharaoh know that Joseph isn't going to go to Canaan and just never come back? But Joseph has earned the trust of Pharaoh, so that Pharaoh will allow him to be gone for what will be several months in order to carry his dad back to the land of Canaan and to bury him in the cave that he bought from Ephron the Hittite at the end of the field in the cave of Machpelah. And so he has a relationship with the embalmers, he has a relationship with Pharaoh so that all that could happen. I do think it's interesting, verse 5. My father made me swear, I'm about to die. In my tomb that I hewed out for myself, the land of Canaan, there you will bury me. That's all Joseph says, but that's not all that Jacob had said. If you go back and read that couple chapters before, Jacob said, do not bury me in this land. But if you're Joseph, you don't go into Pharaoh and go, look, my dad said he didn't want to be married in this dirty, unclean ground. He wanted to go back to the Holy Land. That's not the way you get permission. And so God has put Joseph in there, but also given in control of Joseph's understanding of the way the court system works and how Pharaoh operates and all of that. And so God is in charge of all of that. Now, as you read through it, Pharaoh sends him some guards, some protectors on the trip, some chariots and horsemen and all. So now we're in a time of extreme drought all over that part of the world. Here you are living in the land of Canaan, and what do you see? You see this massive horde of Egyptians coming, and some of them are on horses and chariots. What's your first thought? Invasion. This is an invasion force. And if you think it's an invasion force, what do? You go out and meet force with force. So this could have turned into a battle. It could have turned into a war. But the Bible is very careful to show us that God is in control of all these details. And so Joseph comes to the threshing floor of Atad, and they stop. And so the relationship, their encounter with the Canaanites go from a time of possible war to a time of compassion. When they see the mourning, they realize, oh no, this is not an invasion force, it's a funeral march. And so God's in control of all that stuff as well to make sure that all happens. So they're so moved that they even renamed the place in verse 11, Abel Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is a Hebrew word that's usually translated Egypt. So this is Abel of Egypt. Abel either means mourning or a meadow. So it's maybe the meadow of Egypt, or it could mean the mourning of the Egyptians. But they recognize this, and so they go the whole thing, and then finally they get him there and they bury him. Now, it's interesting how God is in control of your encounters and the relationships that you have in life. And what's really cool is that God never does it the same way twice. For example, I met my wife in high school. We were in the band. My oldest daughter met her husband while helping a church plant doing missions in upstate New York. My other daughter met her husband online. One of my sons met his wife in children's choir at First Baptist Chandler. And one of my sons met his wife while he was in college. All the stories are different. All the way the relationships came about. Because let's face it, if everybody's story was exactly the same, we would never tell any stories. You don't need to tell me. Mine's exactly the same as yours. I mean, one of the joys in life is to hear people's story about how God has moved and worked in their life. Because each of them is unique and special, and each of these is unique and special. God has worked in them. So here's your homework for this week. This is what I want you to do. I want you to take a few minutes and think of 5 people that God has put into your life who've made a great impact in your life. Because they did not happen by accident. And so think about 5 people. Now that's going to be the easy part. Actually, keeping it at 5 may be difficult, but hopefully you can do that. But then I want you to do something else that's going to be more difficult, but I think is just as important. I want you to think of 2 people that God put in your life who caused you problems. Because Joseph didn't go from Canaan to second in charge in Egypt. Joseph was sold by his brothers who wanted to kill him at first, and then decided, let's make some money off of it and sell him into slavery instead. Then he was lied about by his master's wife. Then he got into prison, and then he was given dream interpretation by God, and he told one of the guys, hey man, when you get to Pharaoh, mention me, and the man forgot him. I mean, there were people that God brought into Joseph's life that caused him great sorrow and difficulty. But I want you to understand that those people are part of God's plan as well. Sometimes the most irritable people are the ones that God uses to force us to learn how to pray. Some of you are like, boy, that list's going to be a lot longer. But I think of people that but we need to not just think about the people that God has put in our lives that have shaped us positively. Some people, because of who they are and because they were a real difficulty, also helped to shape us. And were used by God sometimes to accomplish His purpose. So God's in control, not just the positive people, but also some of the negative people as well. So kind of think through those. And so God has put all these relationships in Joseph's life and these encounters because of what He wants to accomplish. He's in control. Now that leads to what we read in verse 15, and that is God's not just in control of the days of your life. He's not just in control of your relationships and encounters. He's also in control of the bad stuff. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God your father." Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for I am in the place of God. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Now, just a few things to note here. One of them is they only ask for forgiveness. They don't try to explain what they did. I would suggest if you ever ask for forgiveness, don't explain why you did what you did. You're not asking for forgiveness, you're asking for understanding. Just ask for forgiveness. But there's something here I think that I want us to see. It is my contention that Jacob never learned that the brothers sold Joseph into slavery. One of the reasons is because he still blesses the other brothers, and Joseph was his favorite. So you say, okay, well now, if Jacob never knew, then how would he tell this to the brothers? Actually, these verses are the reason, or one of the reasons why I think that Jacob never knew. It makes absolutely zero sense that you would say to the brothers, "I'm telling you, tell your brother to forgive you." That doesn't work that way. What would have happened is Jacob would have said, "Joseph, forgive your brothers." Okay, you have no idea. So we're going to be here till you understand what I'm saying. You may not agree, but at least till you understand. So even if you have to fake agreement, that we'll roll with that. All right, so here we have 10 brothers, because Benjamin went around at the time, sell brother number 11, Joseph, into slavery. They lie to dad and say maybe a wild animal killed him. Jacob finds out. And on his deathbed, he doesn't say, "Joseph, remember to forgive your brothers." What does he doesn't say anything to Joseph. He just tells the brothers when Joseph isn't around, "Hey, tell your brother." That just doesn't work that way. Nobody would do that. No one. Jacob would have said Joseph. Or if Jacob had known and told Joseph, the brothers wouldn't have said, "Dad commanded." The brothers would have said, "Remember, Dad said." It makes no sense at all that he would tell the brothers to say nothing to Joseph. So I think the brothers are telling a lie. You say, "Oh, but they're like the founding of the 12 tribes of Israel." They wouldn't be lying. They sold their brother into slavery. Why would it surprise us that they would be liars too? I mean, they already lied to Dad about Joseph. So I don't think that Jacob ever really knew. And so the brothers are afraid that Joseph has just been nice to them because Dad was around, but now that Dad's gone, he's going to seek his revenge for what they had done to him. And so they know that they're not going to get away, so they're trying to invoke the authority of Dad after he's gone by mentioning him. And Joseph weeps. He has forgiven his brothers. Not like sort of forgiven, but has fully forgiven his brothers. And verse 19, he says, "Am I in the place of God? Because vengeance belongs to the Lord." And in verse 20, he makes one of the most significant theological statements that we find in all the Bible. "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." Now, I want to make a few clarifications here. Number one, God is in control of everything. Everything, even the bad and the immoral, and the evil and the wicked. But God is never the cause of evil. He uses it in His plan, but He's never the source or the cause, because God is pure and righteous and good and holy. And so God uses the evil, and what the brothers did was immoral and evil. Well, please, you may not get the whole Jacob, didn't say anything to Joseph, but surely you understand that selling your brothers in slavery is evil. Matter of fact, I would contend selling anybody in slavery is evil. Selling another human being is evil. All right, thank you, very good. So what they did was evil. and not to be excused. But God, because He is so big and so sovereign and so awesome, is able to take even the evil intentions of people and use them for good, as He did here. And so even the bad stuff in your life is a part of what God is doing. God is in control of it. And I think it's important, one theological, but also I think practical. I think it's important because if God's not in control, that means there's something outside the control of God. And I don't want a God who's got stuff that's so powerful He can't control it. So God is in control. Now you may be thinking, wow, I've had a lot of bad stuff in my life. I just don't understand how God uses that for good because it's been so bad. Well, let me see if I can help us. How many of you have a rug in your house somewhere? Okay, some of you are not sure. It's usually cloth or woven. It sits on the floor. You put it like next to the bathtub at least. Those are usually kind of woolly, or in front of the sink. So have you have a rug? Have you ever, if you had, some of you are like, I don't know. Have you ever seen a rug? All right, you've seen a rug. Okay, now the rug on the floor. If someone comes over to your house and comes in, it's the first time ever there, they walk in and say, that is a beautiful rug. You say, yes, but you should really see the bottom of it. You pick up and say, man, look at the bottom side. Nobody does that. You know why? Because the bottom side is not very pretty. It's dirty and ugly. The reality is, you and I see the world and history from the bottom side of the rug. We see the dirty and we see the ugly. But God sees how it all fits together from the other side of the rug. And someday we'll be in heaven and we'll get to see the other side of the rug. So right now, I'm sure Joseph wasn't sitting in prison thinking, wow, it's got to hold on for another 18 months. Because in 18 months, God's going to take this evil that's been done to me and He's going to use it for good by putting me in charge of all the food in Egypt and saving the lives of millions of people. All Joseph knows is, my brother sold me, Potiphar's wife lied about me, and that dude forgot about me, and I'm stuck in prison. And I'm cold, and I'm hungry, and it's uncomfortable, and I may never get out. Let's be honest, sometimes when you're looking at the bottom side of the rug, you think there is no hope. But don't forget, God is in control, even of the bad stuff. Even when we don't understand how He's going to make it good. Joseph, at this point in his life, now sees. And so God's in control of everything, even the bad stuff. And then, I like the very end, because God is even in control of the future. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim, that's just one of his sons. Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the third generation. So he saw his kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids. The children also of Machir to the son of Manasseh were counted as Joseph's own. And Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die. So he knew that his days were over. But God will visit you and bring you out of this land to the land that He swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him. He was put in a coffin in Egypt. Now, this is really good. I mean, it was good for Jacob. It's going to take a few months to get him there. It's really good for Joseph, because it's going to be about 400 years before they get him there. So just think about it. As the decades go by, and they wonder, is God ever going to get us out of here? Is God ever going to deliver us? Because they're going to eventually be enslaved in Egypt. Is God ever going to take us back up to the land? They can look to the coffin of Joseph and be reminded of two things. Number one, what God has done in the past. And number two, God is still at work and going to do it in the future. God will not quit working when you die. God is not done when you're done. God is in control not just of the present, but God is in control of the future. And so the hope that we have is that God is in charge not just of time, but of eternity. In other words, I'm going to heaven because God is in control of my eternity, of my future. The day is coming where I'll be gathered to my people. And so the end of my life is not the end of my life. The end of my life is the end here, but my life will continue because I have my life in Christ Jesus for all of eternity. And so Joseph's coffin is a reminder of the promise of the future. A couple years ago, we had the opportunity to go to Israel with some family, and we were at Gordon's Calvary, which is one of the possible locations of the empty tomb, and I was able to take this picture. This is my brother and his wife, and you're looking at it thinking, man, it looks like Paul. Well, yeah, he's my brother. It's genetic. Okay, he doesn't look like me. So there we are at the tomb. I said, man, I want to get a picture of this. And, you know, when you look at the picture, I want to drive these 2 points home. Number one, behind them is an empty tomb. It's a reminder that Jesus stomped all over death when he walked out of the grave on Sunday morning. That is what he's done in the past. But because of the resurrection, the two people standing there are going to spend forever in heaven. God has control of their future. And I don't know who's going to go first, me or Jason, but it doesn't matter, because the day's coming where we are all going to be gathered to our people. Jason and Stephanie are headed there. Jerry and I are headed there. My other brother and his wife, my sister and her husband, we're headed there. We're going to be gathered to our people. We have confidence in the future because God is in control of the future. And the coffin was a reminder of what God had done and what God had promised he would do. And the empty tomb is a reminder for us of what God has done, but is also a reminder of the promise of what God is going to do in the future for us. Now, when we think about God in control, the obvious is Jesus. He entered into the world exactly when God planned it. In the fullness of time, Christ was born of a woman, born under the law. God knew what he was doing. God was in control of the birth of Jesus. God was in control of the life of Jesus. Jesus said, I don't do my own will, I do the will of my Father. I have to go through Samaria. It was appointed by God. God was in control of his life. And here's what is crazy. God used evil to accomplish his purpose in the life of Jesus. Because it is evil to convict and execute a man that you know is innocent just because you don't like what he teaches. It is evil to manipulate the authorities by threats of an uprising to do what you want to do against somebody, which is exactly what they did to get the Romans to execute Jesus. To go by and spit on this guy and mock him, it is everything about the crucifixion of Jesus is evil. But I'm telling you, God was in control. It was a part of his plan from before the foundation of the world that Jesus would die on the cross, because that's the way that our guilt is paid for and removed. It is by the death of Jesus Christ. God was in absolute control. And God is in such control that he even controls death, because 3 days later, Jesus walked out of the tomb. And so it is a reminder, God is in control of everything. Even the bad stuff. Even the bad dude in your life named Judas who betrays you. God is in control of all of it. But here's the truth. Here's the reality. Here's what's so important. And this is what I want you to walk away with the most today. It is one thing to know that God is in control, but that's not the goal. The goal is to trust the God who is in control. You can say, I know that God is in control, but you don't really trust him. You doubt him. You question him. You try to take charge yourself. The reason the Bible talks to us about the control of God is to create confidence in us so that we can trust him. My eternity is entrusted into the hands of God because I believe that God is worthy of my trust. I believe that when God says he'll do it, he will do it, because he has the power and the ability to control it and to make it happen. And so I don't want you just to leave knowing that God is in control and being able to tell somebody else, you know, God's in control. Get in the car, tone that song, God is in control. That's awesome. That's great. I want you to trust that God is in control. Trust him to be in charge. Put your faith in him. God, who is in control, is worthy of our trust. Joseph didn't just say, I know that God is in control. Joseph trusted that God was in control. We need to trust the God who is in control. Our Heavenly Father, I cannot imagine what it's like to have your own brothers hate you so much they want to kill you, and then decide instead they want to make a little money by selling you into slavery. I cannot imagine what it's like to work hard, to keep your nose clean, to rise and get a position of authority, to have a pretty good life working in Potiphar's house, and then to be lied about by his wife and end up in prison with nothing again. God, I cannot imagine what it's like to have gone through all Joseph did, and then the brothers to show up and to not want to take revenge, to not want to even the score. But he doesn't. Through it all, God, he trusts you, and he's learned, as he declares here, that he's not in place of God, but that you use all of this to accomplish your plan and your purpose, that you're in control of everything. So God, I pray that you would help us when we don't understand what's going on, when it doesn't make sense, when we find ourselves in prison and alone, to trust you, to trust that you are in control, to give that over to you, to put our faith in you. For it is in Jesus' name that we ask it. Amen.